Okay, welcome to another great episode of the Final Mix. I'm your host, John Mahoney. Sitting in with me, as always, is my co-host, Mickey Finn.
Yo, what's up?
Tonight, our guest, very excited to have him here, Mr. Tom Zutaut. Say hello, Tom.
Hello, everybody.
So, for those of you who've been living under a rock, Tom is probably one of the most prolific A&R reps of all time, citing such groups as Mötley Crüe, Guns N' Roses, Metallica, Tesla. Am I missing anyone there?
Dokken, Veruca Salt, Edie Brickell, Enya. There's probably a few more.
Nice. So, I just want to kind of start from Tom. Where are you from?
Chicago.
Okay. And like me, you started in the mailroom, right?
I did. I actually started below the mailroom in the warehouse.
Ooh.
Pulling skids.
Yeah.
Damn. And then how was it that you just rose through the ranks so quickly and, started working with all these great groups?
I always had a passion for music, so I used to deliver newspapers, and I would spend every penny, because that's what you earn delivering newspapers, are pennies. Fortunately, prices were cheaper back then, but I spent all my pennies buying albums, like vinyl albums of new artists, and I sort of played this game with myself on which ones I thought would become successful. So I was kind of like being an A&R guy, listening to finished records in Chicago, not really knowing what A&R people were. And I had a pretty good knack for picking the ones that did well.
Kind of your own smash and trash, huh?
Yeah, it's like my own smash and trash.
Okay.
And, fortunately, the stuff that wasn't all that good, because when you're buying albums by new artists that no one ever heard of before, haven't been on the radio yet, a lot of it is not all that great. But, there was a home for it. Even the stuff I didn't like, I'd had a friend somewhere along the way that liked it, so everything found a good home in the end.
Awesome. So, in chronological order, how did it go down with like the first bands that you worked with? And
well, I'll tell you how I got to Mötley Crüe. That's a very unusual story, in that my high school had a radio station, so I ended up meeting people from Warner Brothers that at a radio conference. And anyway, they offered me a job in the warehouse, and then quickly into the mailroom.
So the mailroom was like a promotion. You were stoked
man,
when you got that.
That was a promotion, and then the promotion up from that was actually inventorying like vinyl spines and accounts, and I did that for a while. And then the coolest thing I got to do was put up displays in the windows of record stores, like when there actually were record stores, even though there's Amoeba and Second Spin and not much else these days. And every city has its Amoeba and Second Spin, so there you go. Anyway, eventually I got noticed by Atlantic Records in New York and Elektra Records in L.A., and it was really a flip of the coin. They both offered me jobs doing national marketing of new artists. They called them special projects, so I kind of got offered the job of becoming a special projects coordinator for either label. And when you grow up in Chicago, like you see these pictures from L.A. of palm trees and beaches, and it never dawns on you that the water is too cold to swim in. But, so I'm like, man, L.A. sounds incredible, and I was like right off the boat. I got on the plane to take this job, and I got off the plane, and I saw palm trees, and I took the rental car out on Pacific Coast Highway, and the next day I got my swimsuit. I tried to get in the water. I was like, wait, no one told me the water was going to be cold. It's summertime.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I did this job at Elektra, and I still played this little game, and I thought, I should start going into like clubs. Like I'm driving past the Whiskey A Go-Go. I'm like, man, the Doors were found there, and, Jimi Hendrix played there, and I'm seeing all these things. And then there was the Starwood, where like a lot of glam bands played the Starwood, and there was Gazzarri's, where Van Halen was discovered. And I'm like, I'm going to start going into the clubs, and I'm still like listening to a lot of import records and stuff. And so, I got a single of Soft Cell doing Tainted Love, and I submitted that to the A&R department at Elektra, and they passed on it. And then I got a single from Joan Jett. It was like a Runaways fan, so I got this Joan Jett single, and the B-side was called I Love Rock and Roll, and I was like, man, I think this could be just like a big monster song, Turned it into the A&R department. They passed on it. And the Human League, Don't You Want Me, and like all this cool stuff. I was like, out of Europe mainly, and And then I saw this band called the Go-Go's, and I thought they were great, and they got passed on, and
Wow.
it was like very, very frustrating. And then X, and they got passed on, and so eventually, this guy turns up at my office who's like my age, and I'm working with people who are way older. I'm like 20 years old, and so this young guy comes in. I'm like, cool, man. There's somebody young here. This is awesome. And this guy's like, you're coming with me. And I'm like, well, who are you? He goes, doesn't matter. I'm taking you somewhere. So I get in this guy's convertible BMW, and, he drives me into Watts to a rib joint. And I'm like, I'm from Chicago. Like in Chicago, if we, went to Watts, like they would steal our tires and stuff. This is like late 70s, a whole different world. In LA in 1980, it was totally cool, for white guys to go into Watts and eat barbecue, man. People were like high-fiving us and everything before high fives were even known about. So finally, I get in this guy's car on the way back, and he's asking me a lot about music and stuff.
You literally have no idea who this guy is.
I have no idea who he is.
He could be like a child molester
Yeah.
or whatever.
Driving a Beamer, so
it's driving
promising.
a convertible Beamer.
You're going to get molested, might as well be by someone in a Beamer, right?
Exactly. So finally, I'm like, look, who are you? He goes, my dad runs a company. He goes, what do you think of the music on my dad's company? I mean, you work there. I said, man, his music sucks, man. This company's dying. I mean, all this music is just crap. I said, I've been trying to help them, but they don't listen to me. I submitted them this and that and this and that. And he said, I told my dad to sign the Go-Go's, and he couldn't get it done. It's his company. I said, well, if it's his company, this just sounds ridiculous. I said, well, why not? He goes, well, they have an A&R department. He lets the A&R department make all the decisions because, he believes in letting the people who run departments run their departments. I said, well, the guy who runs this A&R department should be shot. I mean, all we have is like Robbie Dupree steal a song. It was actually called Steal Away, but it was like a rewrite of the Doobie Brothers' What a Fool Believes.
Right.
So I was like, we're putting out Steal a Song by Robbie Dupree, and, we got this other thing that's like a copy of somebody else, and... and I just said, the music is just shit, And so he said, okay. And he goes, can I tell my dad that? I said, no, I don't want to lose my job. Please, man. I mean, I'm being honest with you, but I said, I don't, your dad's like upstairs in the ivory tower. I don't want to, I don't want to get fired. He's like, all right, man, I won't say anything, but let's be friends, And I mean, in the end, his name was Jeff Smith. His dad was Joe Smith. And, I had a lot of great times with Jeff. I mean, he introduced me to things that, as a young, naive kid from Chicago, I've never heard or seen of before. But I found myself in his dad's wine cellar, nipping on $10,000 bottles of wine and eating incredible cheeses, and it was a great life experience. Anyway, so we get back to the office. He drops me off, and
what label is this at the time?
Elektra.
Okay.
Elektra Asylum Records after David Geffen left.
Gotcha.
And anyway, so I'm not in my office for 30 minutes, and the phone rings, and it's like this woman I've never heard before. Yes, the chairman would like to see you. And I'm like, okay, this is not connected. And so I go upstairs, and I'm kind of freaked out, and I basically, the first thing he says to me, he says, okay, wise guy, I hear from my son that you think the music we're putting out is just absolute shit. And it sucks. And I'm like, well, it does. And he said, all right, wise guy. He goes, if you're so smart, what would you do? And I said, well, I've got a folder downstairs of all the rejection letters, because I said, I know the A&R department's across the street. They're not in the main building, but I said, I'm not allowed to go over there and take them anything, so I have to send it in the mail and wait for a response, even though I work for the same company. They had this strict policy that they only took submissions via mail, Now I'm sure big time lawyers could walk over there and play stuff for them, But anyway, so I had a folder full of rejection letters on all these things that end up being immensely successful. So I go and I get my file and I show it to him, and he says, all right. He says, you think you know better. He said, the next thing you see that you think is going to be big, and I mean sell millions, he said, I want you to bring it directly to me, and I'm going to make sure it gets signed. And a couple of weeks later, I was driving down Sunset Boulevard, and I saw this like sign up the marquee above the whiskey said Mötley Crüe sold out. So I thought, well, I might as well go see it. Why not? And so I went to the whiskey, and it was sold out. I didn't have a ticket, and Mario, who owns it, was there at the door, and there was a woman there, and she says like, "Oh, I'll tell your story to Mario." She's like shuffled me off, and so I said to Mario, I said, "Hey, I work for Elektra, and I really want to check out this band, Mötley Crüe, tonight, and I can't seem to buy a ticket." He goes, "Let me see your business card," and I showed it to him. He says, "It says you're in marketing. You're not in A&R. Why should I let you in?" And I said, "Well, you should let me in because I'm going to be like the most famous A&R guy in the history of the music business one day, and you'll be like the first guy that gave me a break." And he goes, "All right, kid, you're in."
This is the same Mario from the Rainbow, right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Mario, we go way back. I mean, I signed both Mötley and Guns out of the whiskey. So,
wow.
When you read that like plaque that's up front from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, two of the bands that list as the reason for the whiskey being in the Hall of Fame are bands that I signed.
Wow.
I sometimes wonder, like, what if Mario hadn't let me in that night? I mean, maybe I wouldn't have been able to do what I did. Sometimes life boils down to such serendipitous
moment,
things, It's just like a glimmer, But he let me in, and I saw the band, and they were amazing, and I signed them. And, of course, there was a lot of struggle after signing them with a company that was resistant to change, a company that felt that Mötley Crüe was a third-rate, poor man's version of Kiss, and Kiss had died and taken their makeup off and were done. And, but, eventually, in the end, if you persevere with what you believe in, and even though all the music getting played was like Haircut 100 and Flock of Seagulls, and it was all this like new wave music that's hardly even remembered today, but that's what was popular at the moment, all these one-hit wonder sort of poppy new wave records. So, it kind of feels like that's the way it is right now, or all these one-hit wonder records out there. Or maybe 10-hit wonders, some of them.
Let me ask you, so when you saw Mötley Crüe that night, did you do that thing where you like went back and met the band afterwards and told them who you were and told them what your intentions were and everything, or was it more like kind of just went to your boss and said this is the band?
I went back and I hung out with the band and said hello and introduced myself and talked music and Nicky especially, I mean, was a very cerebral guy, so. He had this vision for Mötley Crüe, and he explained it to me, and I kind of understood it, and I felt like I was the person that could help him realize his vision, put the pieces together and get a company behind it, and, I was very altruistic and had a lot of, like, high ideals and morals in terms of this is an artist that he's going to be successful, and I'm going to help him put all these pieces together. I'm going to get this army of Elektra Records behind him. And, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just felt like I would do that. And, of course, the reality sets in and, you get on a conference call and you actually hear the head of promotion telling people not to put Mötley Crüe on the radio because it wasn't the company's priority. And you hear the promotion guy in Denver and another one in Boston are like, but radio wants to play Mötley Crüe. They don't want to play Cold Chisel or Schnizzle or whatever it was, And you hear the head of promotion, "I don't care. We're not promoting Mötley Crüe. We're promoting Cold Chisel." So go change that ad back to Cold Chisel. We don't want Mötley Crüe, And I thought, man, I never thought like I'd work for a record company and I'd have to deal with the record company actually telling their people out in the field to take Mötley Crüe off the radio to put on some other record that was more important. There's a lot of that. Like it's sometimes, when you're going against the grain, it's so hard to get people to do the right thing,
Right. But I mean, after you made them a success, how long did it take before it was like, okay, everyone, now shut the fuck up. I told you they were going to sell 1 million records. They did sell 1 million records. Don't ever doubt me again. Was there some of that going on?
I'm generally pretty humble. I mean, there was a period in my later years at Geffen where I just done so much, and like 5 of the top 10 or 20 on the Billboard chart were bands that I had developed and signed. And, I think everyone, when you grow up in a place like Chicago, and even then, I mean, before I got to Chicago, there was like the small town south of Chicago. You know, I'm pretty humble about everything, but you know, getting into like the alligator of Los Angeles in the heart of Hollywood and entertainment, there were some times where I probably got a little bit like what you suggested. For instance, when I wanted to sign Enya, and I met some resistance in signing Enya because people were saying to me, well, this is really weird. I mean, what do you think to accomplish with this? I mean, at this point, you have 5 of the top 10. You've sold hundreds of millions of albums. If you want to sign someone who farts, go ahead and sign them. But, why waste your time on this? And I said, I can't explain it, but, I know it's like this weird instrumental, atmospheric kind of music, but I said, I just have a feel like I think people need to chill out. I mean, it's like...
You saw a place for that in the music world.
I just felt like that, there was room for this chill out kind of music. It's like I look now and, I saw this thing on TV about this guy he's like doing the anti-Red Bull. He's doing like a chill energy drink, and I saw an interview with him, and I thought... this guy's probably going to make a fortune because, like, in the world of, like, Guns N' Roses and Metallica and all this crazy rock and roll music, there was a place for, like, this one artist to chill everybody out. Mm-hmm. So this guy's got the chill out Red Bull, which, in this time and age, energy drinks are the thing. So I felt like this guy's like me trying to sign Enya. He's trying to hawk this chill out drink. But the funny thing is, Enya sold more records than Guns N' Roses, if you can believe it.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Had no idea.
Yeah, the biggest artist I ever signed in the history of my career is Enya.
Wow.
I didn't know that. Listen, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about Guns N' Roses, more with Tom Zutaut when we come back. ArtistPR.com, your one-stop drop for all your music promotion needs. Members of Artist PR are able to submit their music to radio and press all over the world. They can also submit their music to licensing opportunities for television and film. Even get their own music video, plus downloadable contracts, industry directories, and all the tools and resources an artist needs to promote their music. Go to FinalMixShow.com and click on the Artist PR banner to try it for 5 days for just $2.95. That's ArtistPR.com. Okay, welcome back to the Final Mix. Actually, during the break, one of Tom's clients, a fabulous Miss Wendy, came in. Welcome, Wendy.
Hello.
Great to have you on the show. We're going to actually hear a little bit from Wendy. But first, we're going to talk a little bit more with Tom and talk about Guns N' Roses. Obviously, I know you get asked about that a ton, and we've talked a lot about that. But I at least thought one of the most fascinating things about that whole story is, the fact that you would sign Mötley Crüe, had all the success, and how Guns N' Roses came so close to not making it. And if it wasn't for you just going and fighting for these guys, they would not be the band that they were today.
Yeah, it's like I had said a little while ago, it's amazing, no matter what your track record is or how much you've done or how many records you've sold, it really boils down to, it's an artist by artist thing, like every time you put something out, there's some kind of a struggle involved, and it doesn't matter what you did yesterday or a year ago. I mean, everything is like at face value brand new, so... Guns N' Roses scared people. I mean, Mötley Crüe were like the third-rate Kiss that were the laughing stock of L.A. Guns N' Roses were these like dangerous drug addicts that everyone was scared of, and MTV vowed from the day the album came out that they would never play something like Guns N' Roses ever, and to not even bother badgering them or talking to them. Radio refused to play Guns N' Roses. I mean, at least with Mötley Crüe, I mean, radio wanted to play it, but the Elektra employees were trying to keep it off the radio because it wasn't their priority. In this case, radio literally said, this band is too dangerous, we can't play it, and they don't have any hits. So, anyway, I called up friends and got them on tours, and, Ian Astbury was a fan of the band, and Guns N' Roses were dying on the vine, and I talked to Ian and said, hey man, I got this new band. If you guys take them out on tour, it'll be really awesome. And he did, and And I mean, lo and behold, later on Use Your Illusions, when Steven Adler, was out of the band, Matt Sorum from the Cult came in and played drums, and they totally hooked up on that tour. And, the Cult tour ended, and, got him on some Mötley Crüe dates, and just, paying it forward, trying to keep him out on the road. And, the record kept selling by word of mouth. And, of course, in today's world, 200,000 would seem like a lot, but we were at 200,000 units with no airplay, no MTV, no nothing.
Just by creating the demand, virtually supply and demand, right? You're out there creating the buzz, and the band was creating their own buzz, and they have no choice but then to start playing.
It was like, it was great because you put them in front of a couple thousand people or 5,000 people, and hundreds of people in that city went out and bought the CD the next day.
Right.
Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. So I get called up into the president of Geffen's office, and he looks at me and he says, the Guns N' Roses Appetite for Destruction is over. There's no debate, no discussion. The record's done. I'm instructing you as a president of the company, you're not allowed to go into anyone's office and badger them about Guns N' Roses anymore. The record's done. So I looked at him and I said, well, actually, the record's just beginning. I mean, this record's still got to sell like 5 or 10 more million. I mean, 200,000 that's just like a few people like going to the concert and getting excited. We're not done yet. He said, you got to listen. He said, radio's not going to play it. MTV's vowed they'll never play it. It's done. And I'm instructing you to go do demos and make their next record. And I said to him, actually, it's a good thing that I work for David Geffen and not for you, because I'm not going to listen to what you have to say, and I'm going to go see David Geffen.
Wow.
Who was that just told you that, what you just said?
A guy named Ed Rosenblatt, who actually he's actually a great guy. He was like the Solomon who kept everyone stable at Geffen Records, because we were a bunch of crazy people working there. It was like, David's playpen. I mean, you think, Brian Wilson in the Sandbox is weird. I mean, Geffen was this crazy place filled with like lots of A-type personalities who kicked ass at whatever they did. And, man, people could get into a big fight there if they disagreed on things. But anyway, so I went up to David and, I made my pitch. And he looked at me and he said, well, he goes, what is the one thing that I could do to make a difference in this situation? He goes, on one hand, I have you, the ears and soul of the music of the company. And then I have the people who market and sell it and promote it. And he goes, right now they want me to fire you because they feel like you've unmercifully beat them up over Guns N' Roses.
I love it.
And I said, I guess you could fire me, but then you wouldn't sell 10 million Guns N' Roses records because you'd walk away from this record. And he's like, well, what's the one thing I can do? I said, if you put the Welcome to the Jungle video on MTV, man, the record will literally explode overnight. And he said, you really think that? I said, no, I don't think it. I know it. I said, there's some things I know and some things I think, but this I know. And he said, okay. So about a day later, he called me up into his office. And he looked at me. He goes, you're a liar. He goes, you lied to me. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, you didn't tell me that MTV had vowed to never play this band. And I said, you didn't ask. And he said, let me explain something to you. Do you understand how it works? MTV survives because these like right-wing conservatives who own these gigantic cable companies like John Malone and the Dolans that run Cablevision, and he names all these people who are probably like in his circle of like billionaires and who own these cable companies that service millions of homes. So he says, here's the thing. This band is very dangerous. MTV feels that if they put this band on the channel, if John Malone decides to drop MTV off of his networks, they lose like 10 million viewers overnight. So he said, this is like the impossible task. But he said, in spite of that obstacle, he said, MTV are going to play that video one time. So he says, I will have honored my commitment to you. You asked me what was the one thing that I could do. And he goes, they vowed to never play it, but they're going to play it at 4 a.m. New York time. It'll be 1 a.m. in L.A. on Sunday night. They figure John Malone won't be watching then. So,
wow.
and whatever the other guys' names were that run these conservative cable companies that pipe stuff into people's homes. But anyway, so I thought, well, I guess the band and I'll have a party. We'll like stay up and watch it on the screen, see what it looks like. And I was like almost fully prepared now because there was nowhere else to go really other than David Geffen. That, well, it's down to this one play on MTV, like the entire fate of rock and roll, and certainly
It's like
Guns N'
3
Roses.
seconds on the clock, the Hail Mary of rock and roll, you know?
Yeah,
Wow.
that's it, man. It's like, 1 second left, and, the quarterback is like back there dancing around, The
Crazy.
clock is gone, and, literally, if he gets the pass off, once that either gets caught or drops, it's done.
Yeah.
So you had how much time to prepare for this? Like, was it a few days later they were going to air it?
Oh, this was like on a Tuesday, and I had to wait till Sunday. So,
Right.
I was pretty antsy, man, just sort of on pins and needles.
Did you try to
waiting
get
for the
word
Sunday.
out? Did you try to promo the fact that it was going to be
yeah,
on at
absolutely.
that time?
I mean, we put the word out wherever we could, but there was no internet then.
No
So
Right.
Facebook or anything
yeah,
like
there's like really no way other than word of mouth.
right.
And there were some press people, that could put blurbs out, but by the time they got printed, it was over.
Yeah.
So it was really a different kind of world. It wasn't like MTV was going to promote the fact that they were going to play this video. So, we finally get to Sunday, and Guns N' Roses were living in what we called the Hell House, and there was a TV there, fortunately. So we go and we all hang out and watch this video, and it's a great party. We're like throwing stuff up in the air. We see it. It was amazing. We're probably up till about 8 a.m. And so, I got back to, my place and crashed out. And at about, 3 in the afternoon, I finally woke up. And, at that point, we had like cell phones that were like the size of a gigantic brick.
Right. Like Wall Street.
Yeah. Exactly. So I noticed I had like a bunch of missed calls, and I was like, So I called my office. I'm like, where are you, man? People are looking for you. Everybody's looking for you. And I said, well, I was up late last night. One of the great things about doing A&R is that you can stay up all night and sleep all day and still get your work done. But anyway, so I got into the office, and the head of promotion was waiting for me. And this is a guy who told me Guns N' Roses would never get put on the radio and all that good kind of stuff. And I thought, well, I wonder what he wants. I mean, he's trying to get me fired a few days ago and complaining about me and getting the company to walk away from Guns N' Roses. And now he wants to see me. So I swear, man, I go into his office, and this guy, he turns red. His eyes are bulging like a monster. And he's like, he's like gibbering, and I can't even understand what he's saying, Finally, I decipher what he's saying is MTV's switchboard blew up and caught on fire. Literally. And their phones are down, but somebody called me to tell me that that they never got so many requests for a video in the history of the channel, and they never knew it was even possible that if like X thousands of phone calls came into a switchboard simultaneously, it would blow it up. Because back then, it wasn't a digital like thing. It was like, all wires and circuits and stuff. A switchboard was like a, it wasn't all through a computer. It was like a physical thing. And that physical thing like caught on fire from all the phone calls,
Crazy.
all those electric impulses coming in at once. And they added the video. And, the record went from 200,000 to 1 million in like 10 days. It was the most insane thing that anyone had ever seen. Yeah.
Full blown.
Yeah. And it was so undeniable. The response was so overwhelming that, it changed MTV's opinion. I mean, they were like, well, we got to get in on this because, I mean, you got to imagine that people were like literally watching MTV waiting for this video.
Yeah.
And then one kid would see it and just freak out and call all his friends. And, you know, people were having parties to watch it. So it changed the course of history, you know, and, you know, it just proves that if you believe, you know, you can overcome the obstacles, even one as great as MTV saying they would never play the band. And it's kind of funny now because when MTV meant something and it really was music television, I mean, Guns N' Roses was one of the things that put MTV over the top and made it
for sure.
a have-to-do kind of thing. And then, of course, you know, we made the video for Sweet Child of Mine, and, you know, I'd given, you know, we basically had a head of pop promotion, a head of rock promotion, and this guy who handled MTV was like the pop guy. But then the rock guy, you know, I thought he was going to be a big supporter of the band, and then he wasn't because he couldn't get radio to play it. But he at least liked the band. But I'd given him a sealed envelope. And inside that envelope, I had written that Sweet Child of Mine will be a #1 hit, top 40 record. And we made this video. That track exploded. It went on top 40 radio, and it went to #1. And the day it went to #1, you know, I went down to that guy's office, and I said, "Hey, dude," I said, "you got that sealed letter I gave you?" He goes, "Yeah, I've been wondering about that for months, like for a year." He goes, "You wouldn't let me open it, so it's still sitting in there sealed." I said, "Why don't you open it up and read it right now?" He opens it up, he reads it, he goes, "How the fuck did you know? How did you know?"
Yeah.
You were some sort of sorcerer.
And I just said, I don't know, but the one thing I did know was that Guns N' Roses were going to be huge, and they're going to have a #1 hit single with Sweet Child of Mine, because that was the song that finally said to me they were ready to make the record. But I buried it at the end of side 2 because radio people being how they are, they'll just go to that first. And, you know, that wouldn't have been the way for people to discover Guns N' Roses. The way to discover them was through Welcome to the Jungle.
Yeah.
One thing I don't get is visually, Mötley Crüe seemed a lot more shocking than Guns N' Roses. And why do you think you got more resistance with Guns N' Roses and not Mötley Crüe?
You know, I could never really figure that out.
I mean, you think it was like their antics and their street life, so to speak? Because they were always up. There was always getting into something, and like you said, drug use and that kind of thing. You think it was like their reputation?
Nikki Sixx was no angel.
But were people afraid of them?
People were literally afraid of Guns N' Roses. You know, people weren't afraid of Mötley Crüe. I mean, you know, Mötley Crüe were rebellious and you know, they had antics and they did crazy stuff.
Yeah, they did kind of dress like chicks, though.
But somehow they were less threatening, you know, believe it or not. And, you know, their songs actually are very hooky and very poppy and very commercial in a way. You know, Nikki Sixx writes hit songs. You know, Guns N' Roses obviously had as many or more hits than Mötley Crüe. But, you know, there was this thing about Guns N' Roses. People were deathly afraid of them. I mean, they were afraid to look at them. I mean, one of the funniest days at Geffen would be when Guns N' Roses were rolling by. Everyone would close the doors to their offices and hide.
Wow.
Seems so ridiculous.
You know, I don't know if you know this, but Mickey Finn, former singer of Jet Boy, actually played some early shows with Guns N' Roses. Were you afraid of him, Mickey?
No. I mean, because I was friends with all the guys, and, you know, we were peers in the music scene, and I just didn't see him that way at all. I mean, they were all super cool guys and fun to hang out with.
Came and stayed at your house even, right?
Yeah, we were kind of ruling the San Francisco scene, and we came to L.A. and opened for Guns N' Roses and Poison and L.A. Guns and those bands, and they would come up to San Francisco and play with us up there.
We met back then, didn't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
Very cool.
We wound up signing with MCA, and you know, we had our trials and tribulations, but no, I didn't. You know, it's kind of shocking to me to hear that people were that terrified of Guns N' Roses because they weren't big, muscular, scary guys. So to speak.
It was wild. I could never like put
wiry.
my finger on it, but you know,
they were reckless though. They were super reckless.
Absolutely.
They never knew what they were going to do next. You know.
I mean, there was an RV like for a dressing room at one of the video shoots, and I mean, Slash disappeared with the RV in the middle of the shoot and turned up like a day later. The thing was all bashed and dented, and I mean, they were crazy like that. I mean, we're making a video, and all of a sudden, the dressing room is gone and Slash is gone, only to be found a day later, and the thing looked like it had been squeezed through parked cars.
Oh my God!
Somehow that kind of behavior worked for them. It doesn't always for every band. It definitely didn't work for us. There was a few hotel thrashings and that kind of thing, in which we got totally screwed for and in trouble and huge bills and stuff. But I was always hearing about stuff with those guys, and they could just get away with it for some reason. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, your band was great too. You were just missing someone like me to push that company over the edge. I mean, it's really, it's like a lot of the success stories. There's that one person behind the scenes that just, doesn't give up and just keeps pushing it over the edge. And, I was really fortunate that, David Geffen encouraged the sort of rebellious behavior that allowed people like me and John Kolodner and Gary Gersh to push things over the edge. But, a lot of companies were way more corporate than Geffen.
Yeah, definitely.
And, people didn't have that sort of freedom. It's like, if someone said it's over, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Hey, before we go to break, just wanted to ask you about this real briefly. We've never actually talked about this, but Metallica, I know they were on like an independent before they got to Elektra. So what was your involvement with them? I mean, did you...
Well, it's really a funny story, but I got a phone call from their attorney and Lars, and basically they called me, and because of what I had done, with Mötley Crüe and Dokken and a band called Riot, they knew I was like a rock dude.
I remember Riot.
And Swords and Tequila,
Hell
Fire Down Under, Anyway, basically they were in this like lawsuit, and they needed a couple of $100,000 like yesterday, and basically they were so desperate to get off of I think it was Megaforce. Of course, there's a revived Megaforce now that's a whole different animal, and they're putting out a lot of interesting records, and it's not the same sort of setup as the one that Metallica were trying to escape from. And it was one of those things, and I mean, I felt like it was just, a gold bullion bar falling in your lap. And, to me, spending the couple of $100,000 to extricate them from Megaforce was a no-brainer. I knew at that time that I was going to be leaving Elektra, and so I was begging them to wait, but because of their legal situation, they had to jump. And so, basically, I signed them and brought them into Elektra, and I turned them over to a guy named Michael Alago to actually be their day-to-day A&R guy, because I knew I was leaving. And, and the band knew that I was going to be leaving. And, I'd get a call from Lars or Kirk every now and then, and I'd give them some advice and help them out even after I left. But the other thing is there was this great head of promotion, a guy named Mike Bone, and knowing that I was leaving the band in Mike Bone's hands, and Mike Bone was going to put them on every radio station in America, they're going to have their big breakthrough, and then they hooked up with Bernstein and Mensch at Q Prime, and so it wasn't like I was leaving them in a bad position. I was mainly bummed that I couldn't have them be my first signing at Geffen.
Right. So you left Elektra to go to Geffen.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And this was about 3 months before I was going to leave, and it wasn't 100%, but it was like 99% because Elektra was no longer an LA-based company. I didn't really want to move to New York, and it was being run out of New York. But my good buddy Mike Bone was one of the main guys in New York, so I hung around for a while, but ultimately it became a New York-based companies with different kinds of priorities, and I signed a band called The Cure to Elektra, and the credit for that was given to someone else. And
you left them with a couple nice parting gifts, didn't you?
Yeah, I left them with some really nice gifts. Public Image, Johnny Rotten, and who was one of my like teenage heroes, and ended up working with him, and he and I still have some funny dialogues. I mean, I later signed a punk band out of England, an all-girl punk band. They were called Fluffy, and we sold a couple 100,000 records. There was a big buzz on them, and their record was called like the best punk rock record since London Calling by The Clash by the Village Voice, a guy named Robert Christgau, who used to be like one of the God critics after Lester Bangs died. But anyway, hopefully that'll mean something to some of the people, some of the old timers who are listening to this that remember these guys. But anyway, you know, I left Elektra with a lot, and you know, it was kind of bittersweet because I thought like I might spend my whole career there, but you know, right in the middle, you know, they fired the dad of the guy that took me to the rib joint, and they brought in this guy named Bob Krasnow, who was like a jazz and R&B guy, you know, George Benson kind of guy, and you know, he wanted to remake Elektra in a different vision. In fact, you know, he took me out to dinner in Beverly Hills to Mr. Chow's and told me he was dropping Mötley Crüe and he was getting rid of Dawkins and, you know, he didn't want that kind of music on his label anymore. And I thought, wow, I guess I won't have a job too much longer. And then while we were having dessert, he said, you know, I'm going to promote you and give you a company car. You know, what would you like? And I was like, man, I just saw these new Vets came out. I'd really love one of those. He goes, you go to the dealership tomorrow, you pick out whatever Vet you want, you call the head of finance and tell him to send you a check.
Wow.
Cool.
I have arrived.
It's pretty cool.
Man, that kind of messes with your head. You
Yeah,
know?
right.
But then I thought, wow, I have a nice car, but what am I going to do for work?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and I was trying to sign this band called Berlin. You know, they had this song Sex that was like really cool. K-Rock was starting to play it off an indie label. And he liked that. You know, he was like all for that. And so I thought, well, I guess I'm going to have to sign like music this guy likes now. You know, I'm not going to be able to do the hard rock thing. But it's okay because I always loved all kinds of music. I wasn't like really into just one thing. But so I drove around that Vet for a while, and then Berlin signed to David Geffen instead of with me at Elektra. And before you know it, I mean, I think this guy had sort of like a cocaine problem, and all this weird stuff started happening. And, you know, I would go to New York and have meetings, and he'd be slouched back in his seat, and he'd be kind of like puffing his pelvis out at me, and it'd be weird. I'd be like, fuck, what have I got myself into here, man? I got to get out of here. You know, but he definitely, like, he let you know he was the king of the fucking jungle, and you were going to do what he told you to do. And it wasn't like, you know, working for the Joe Smith Elektra where I could sign whatever I wanted and, you know, and get people to promote it. And around the same time, I mean, I got this phone call from David Geffen basically saying, you know, I'd like you to come work for me at, you know, Berlin. Tell me they almost signed with you, and you got this and this and this, and these things are all big, and, you know, I'm building this new company, and, you know, I need someone like you. And, you know, I'd read about David Geffen when I was a teenager, you know, and before I took that job to move to L.A. to work for Elektra. And, you know, David Geffen actually had run Elektra just before Joe Smith, so I missed him by a little bit, but I met people who knew him while I was at Elektra. And anyway, so when he said, why don't you come work for me, and I thought, man, I read about this guy when I was a teenager, and I admired him and what he did with artists, and, you know, I want to be like him. I want to find all these artists that sell millions of records, and I'm kind of on my way, but I'm having trouble getting the guy in New York to like get rid of the blow and quit being king of the jungle, you know?
Right.
You know, I don't have enough individual freedom, you know, to do what I think is right. And David Geffen said to me, he said, whatever deal we agree on for you, whatever your piece is, you'll get your piece. But he said, I will support your creative decisions 1,000%. And the whole time I worked there, he did. I mean, if I made a record for $300,000 for a band and it sucked, he would give me another $300,000 to remake the record with somebody else.
Wow.
You know, if a band needed a video and I thought like that was the most important thing, I would go to him and he'd say, if that's what you think needs to be done, you got it. And, you know, it's funny, you know, when I was going to sign Veruca Salt, I had a fight with the head of business affairs because part of signing them meant that I had to give $100,000 to a guy who ran this little indie label. And the business affairs guy was like, that's a waste of money. We're not doing it. And so finally, you know, I'm like, why am I arguing with this guy? You know, I'm wasting my fucking time here, you know. I just called David Geffen and I said, look, I need your help. I said, I'm trying to sign this band. They're amazing. I saw them at South by Southwest. And, you know, they're going to sell millions of records, you know. And I said, I'm fighting with this head of business affairs over $100,000. It's hardly worth my time. And David said, you know what? Tell him I said to pay the money, you know. So
that's got to feel good.
Yeah. So I called the guy and I said, just write the check, put it in the deal. It's done, you know. And he said, well, I'm going to have to double check and make sure you're telling me the truth. I said, go be my guest. Of course, that guy hated me after that. But,
right.
You know, if you're making too many friends, you know, it probably means you're not fighting hard enough for your artist.
True.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, on that note, going to take another commercial break. When we come back, going to hear a track from the fabulous Miss Wendy, and also some very dramatic music news that me and Mr. Mickey Finn were actually a part of at the Whiskey. Hear all about it after this when we come back.
Ooh.
TuneCore.com is the #1 way for bands and musicians to sell their music to their fans. Get your music on iTunes, Rhapsody, Amazon, MP3, Music.com, and the list goes on. Best of all, keep 100% of the royalties. Try keeping 100% of the royalties on a major label. Am I right? Anyways, go to FinalMixShow.com, click on the TuneCore banner, and get your music sold all over the world right now.
A fight outside a popular West Hollywood nightclub. The suspects flee in a car, hitting pedestrians as deputies give chase before opening fire. This all happened outside the Whiskey A Go-Go nightclub at Sunset and Doheny in West Hollywood. Eyewitness News reporter Alex Michelson is live on the Sunset Strip, where it all began with a fight in the parking lot. Alex.
Well, Leslie, the bands first arrived to this iconic spot around 7 o'clock last night to unload their gear. They weren't allowed to leave till close to 8 o'clock this morning. The parking lot is reopened after an 8-hour investigation, allowing the headlining band to finally go home.
Finally getting out. I just feel free. Freedom.
On Facebook, you can see the Cold Blue Rebels' gory side on stage. But while performing last night, a real-life horror was unfolding outside.
Okay, so you were just listening to the official newscast of something that happened to me and Mickey Finn.
Trouble at the Whiskey.
Monday night. So you heard the official version there, but Mickey, it was your show. Cold Blue Rebels were playing. I was there. But why don't you tell your version of what happened?
Still a little nutty for a Monday night in Hollywood. I kind of expected a mellow night, mellow show. And, lo and behold, while we were on the stage or shortly thereafter, a fight ensued in the back parking lot in which I believe one of the guys from the band that went on before us, Feedback was stomped to the curb in the parking lot back there. One of my friends went back there as there was 4 guys kicking and stomping this guy who was already looked unconscious on the ground. A lot of people saw it, started dialing 911. The attackers then jumped in their cars and bolted out of the parking lot. One guy lost control immediately, struck a pole. As he came around the front of the building, this guy tried to stop him. And then he actually got run over and into a pole, and the car hit the building. Actually, the Whiskey building has chunks missing out of it. And then the cops were kind of immediately on it because I'm sure they weren't too far away.
Yeah, there's always cops
Always cops around, yep. So these guys sped down Sunset towards the Key Club. The cops were able to forcibly stop them. At which time they thought they saw what looked like a gun, some kind of object. They fired shots at the vehicle. No one was struck, and they arrested the 2 guys, and the other 2 are still being looked for. But yeah, it was just a mess because at that point, people were injured. Vehicular manslaughter. They closed down the whole Sunset Boulevard from about the Rainbow down past the Whiskey. No one was allowed to leave the scene. It definitely put a damper on the night, and everyone was just kind of, holding up their hands saying, like, why? What? What? Yeah, what, no, it was. What could cause something like that?
Never seen anything
violence,
like it. I don't understand the part where, like, just forget about even going to jail or getting busted. Like, what can make you so mad about a total stranger that you're gonna, like, beat this person to end consciousness?
Yeah,
like, Sociopath, man.
I mean, you could say, oh, well, they were drunk or whatever, but it's like, come on, what kind of person does stuff like that, even when you're drunk?
When you're drunk.
And then hop in a car and, like, knock people down like bowling pins.
Well, and these kids were, like,
crazy.
Kids were 18 and 20 years old, so fucked up. But
messed up, yeah.
Well, they, in no way do I think it reflects on, the music scene, the rock and roll music scene, rockabilly, psychobilly, horror punk, which was the theme of the night. We're just all up there having a good time. I mean, my band, we do a stage show where we wear zombie makeup and we have zombie go-go dancers and, we have a hearse and coffins on stage and stuff. But, that's all in fun. I mean, we're not, trying to preach violence. We're just preaching have a good time at a rock and roll show. And it's just sad that two guys can come along and kind of, leave a nasty stain on the scene for everyone to say, like, oh, yeah, see, you shouldn't be going into Hollywood and going to rock concerts or whatever, which is really not the case. There's always a few bad apples in the bunch. And unfortunately, on this night, these two schmoes just, ruined the night for everybody. And we all got stuck at the Whiskey with our gear and our merch and everything was there. We couldn't get our cars out of the parking lot. I think you took a cab. I eventually wound up taking a cab home and coming back the next morning for my car. My bandmates had to stay there with the gear and everything. And, it was just an unfortunate scene, which... Yeah,
it sucks. And the singer of Feedback is still in intensive care, so bad times. Yeah. But on a brighter note, we're going to hear a track from the fabulous Miss Wendy. But first, Tom, why don't you... I know... You've been working with Wendy for a little bit and very passionate about this project. Why don't you give us the 411 for those of us listening that don't know all about the fabulous Miss Wendy?
Well, it's one of those things. Sometimes people will say to me, they'll say, "You've like climbed every mountain. I mean, from Enya to Guns N' Roses. I mean." What else is there for you to possibly do?
Is Enya really a mountain to climb?
Yeah.
The Enya Mountain.
The Enya Mountain. But the Irish Enya Mountain. But anyway, so, I'm always looking for great new music or, great new music and, interesting people who create the great new music. And, lately, like on one hand, there's a lot of music out there, which is kind of exciting and encouraging. But in terms of, something you feel that's great, that's different, that, adds some new twist to it all. And there's this kind of like this one thing that I always wanted to do but never did. And it comes from being a teenager when the Runaways exploded and, seeing like Joan Jett and Lita Ford, like these two badass chicks rocking out on guitar and, Lita being this great lead guitar player and then, seeing Nancy Wilson and Hard and kind of, saying to myself, you know what? I don't know what it is, but not a lot of women seem to be able to play lead guitar, okay? And I'm like counting them, and I think I can come up with 7, and I think actually the editor of Guitar Player magazine maybe has identified about 15. So whether... Now, I don't know if I agree with all his choices, but, it's a free country. We're all free to disagree or agree. But anyway, whether there's 7 or 15...
There's not a lot, for sure.
In the grand scheme of things, for some reason, there have not been a lot of women that can play lead guitar and, like, really do it. And the one thing I know from my career, and, from Mick Mars to George Lynch to... Slash to Tom Morello, who I signed to Geffen with his first band before Rage. One thing about these great guitar players is they train like Olympic athletes.
Yeah,
I mean, they're playing all the time, And so I always wanted to find someone like that. And then, kind of at the tail end of my working for major labels, I saw this band Nashville Pussy, and the woman in that band, Ryder Size, was like this badass female, Angus Young, man, like just shredding it, But with a name like Nashville Pussy, I mean, if this were like the real radio, they'd be beeping me right now.
Yeah, right.
They would never change their name, wouldn't even go to the initials of NP. So it had like limited possibilities for exposure. I mean, they're still a great band, and their fans still come out to see them. You know, but they're kind of like a cult band.
Yep,
really.
definitely.
So anyway, you know, there's this uncharted territory in my career of finding this incredibly great female guitar player, but has to have great songs. Now, whether the female great guitar player can write those songs or they have a partner that's a great lead singer, you know, there's that like classic dynamic duo of Jagger Richards, you know, Perry Tyler, you know, Plant Page, you know, and there's Jimi Hendrix, right? And then there's the fabulous Miss Wendy, who plays incredible guitar, writes great songs, and has a great voice, you know. And so it's like the one uncharted thing that I never succeeded at. And lo and behold, you know, my daughter's doing a Nickelodeon show that's in development by actually the Backstreet Boys, you know, whatchamacallit, NSYNC people, Lou Pearlman people out of Florida. So anyway, you know, my daughter gets into the thing, and they call me like the day before the first, you know, session with the chosen people that are going to be part of this show. And they say, well, we have bad news for you, which is, you know, we found a better guitar player than your daughter. And I was like, uh-oh, man, this is going to be a bummer because she's all excited about it. But they said, but we're going to keep her. We're just going to move her over to bass because, you know, we see she plays bass, keyboards, and guitar, so we're going to move her to bass. And so I'm like, I better go see who this guitar player is because, yeah, you know, my daughter's pretty badass. She plays rhythm guitar, writes great songs. You know, it's cool that she has those talents. And so I want to see who this is. So I went, and there was Wendy, you know, playing the Eddie Van Halen riffs and all sorts of stuff. And I was like,
now I can't wait to hear it.
Holy shit, man. This girl can rock, you know, because, you know, she was a teenager then. I mean, she's still a teenager, but she was a teenager a few years ago, too. So anyway, she's actually 23, so she's a little bit older than a teenager. But anyway, I was just, you know, stunned. And, you know, the show ended up splintering, and it never got picked up by Nickelodeon. So it was like one of those things in development. Like a lot in Hollywood gets developed and never makes it to the big tube, you know. So anyway, that's where I saw her, and I kind of kept track of her. And for a while, you know, after the Nickelodeon thing didn't pan out, some of the girls formed a band that played around a little bit, did a couple of gigs, and then Wendy kind of went off on her own. And I said to her, listen, you know, if you ever put a demo together, you get some music together, you know, I'd like to hear it. And a few years later, you know, she had stuff to play for me, and, you know, and that's really how we met and started working together.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well, Wendy is actually here. Hello, Wendy.
Hi.
So how long have you been playing guitar for?
About 13 years, almost 14.
Awesome. And you recently went on the Out on Tour with Slash, right?
Yeah, I opened for Slash. It was awesome.
Yeah, very cool. So what's this track we're about to hear?
This one's called One True Thing, and it's just about the pleasure of going to a rock and roll show.
Very cool.
And you singing and playing guitar.
Yeah, I sing and play and write.
And you have a band, a set band now?
Yeah, the band called The Fabulous Miss Wendy.
All right, awesome. Let's hear it.
Cool. This is
Our trio.
One True Thing by the fabulous Miss Wendy.
wish I were there with you. It's nothing I'd rather do. You but now we're holding hands, seeing all the favorite bands. One true thing gets me going. One thing that gets me going. One true thing that I like. One thing that gets me high. It's one true thing that I know. There's nothing like going to a rock show. One true thing, so let's go. There's nothing like going to a rock show. Nothing like going, so let's go. So don't tell me that you wanna see me happy. Don't tell me that I'll never be alone. Oh, don't tell me that you'll help me find the way back home. I don't wanna go. Don't you think it's kind of bad when you're sitting in your class, thinking about your favorite band, and you wonder if you'll pass? One true thing gets me going. One thing that gets me going. One true thing that I like. One thing that gets me high. It's the one true thing that I know. There's nothing like going to a rock show. One true thing, so let's go. There's nothing like going to a rock show. Nothing like going, so let's go.
Okay, we're back. That was the fabulous Miss Wendy with
Awesome,
One True
awesome
Thing.
stuff. Good
Yeah,
stuff.
very
Thank you.
cool. Enjoyed that. I was actually there when you shot the video for that, which will be coming out soon, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else coming up that you want to plug or playing anywhere? or-
Just announced a bunch of dates in where Salt Lake City. Are we going to Chicago, Indianapolis?
Nice.
Where else? Detroit. Am I missing something? I'm
Anything
missing
local
something.
here?
Yeah.
No,
Not right now?
nothing. Yeah,
All right.
no
Well, I'll
shows
keep
in
my
LA
eyes
right
peeled.
now.
I'll keep my eyes
Very
peeled
cool.
for you.
Yeah, we'll definitely let you know. You know, we have an offer to play the Hard Rock at Hollywood and Highlands. So
Cool.
you know, we may the woman who books that's a very big fan of Wendy's and has been badgering us to play there. So
She said I can have the whole night and do whatever I want.
Wow. Nice.
Very cool.
yeah,
Hey,
so
maybe you can have my band open up.
Yay!
Yeah.
there
Have
you
a
go.
giant party.
have a big party. Yeah, it'd be a lot of fun.
Very cool. So, Tom, let me ask you this. You're batting 1,000 as far as being able to pick bands that are going to go on to be successful. Was there ever a band where you were like, no fucking way are these guys ever going to make it, and then they went on to actually do something that you passed on and maybe not wished you hadn't, but where they surprised you and actually became successful anyways?
Poison.
Really?
Yeah, I passed on Poison. You know, I thought they were just like a big bunch of posers.
Well, Slash actually almost was a guitar player of Poison, which...
Yeah, he auditioned, and then you know he thought they were a bunch of posers too. But you know, it's really funny because you know I actually respect those guys now, and I view it as it was kind of a dumb sort of thing, but But yeah, I went to the studio and heard their stuff, and I thought that they were more in it for being rock stars than in it for the music. But then, when I heard that song, Every Rose Has Its Thorn, it was like a very touching song and one of those classic 80s hair band.
I mean, they definitely,
ballads.
they came into their own. I mean, I have to agree. They were posers, back then. And the songwriting was, not so intellectual, but they had good work ethic.
Yeah, Brett Michaels' work ethic is
and
crazy.
they became a great band. They became a great band, can't take anything away from them, so.
Absolutely. So the other thing was, obviously, there's not nearly as many A&R reps as there used to be.
Yeah.
And
What's
I
up
know
with that?
when we were talking last time, we were kind of talking about, the future of the music business and the music industry sort of being like Budweiser or a puppy mill. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Kind of. I mean, I feel like the music business today, is sort of like there's Budweiser and the microbreweries, and the big labels are kind of like Budweiser now, and they're using this formula and they're cranking it out, man. They're mass producing millions and millions of bottles of Budweiser. But the other side of it is that there are individuals, some with enough money to have these indie labels, and some that are, selling their cars to make records and put them out. But, there are more microbreweries now than there have ever been, and so there's a really diverse selection of music. It makes it hard, for people to find the music because it's so fragmented,
So you're saying less major labels, more indie labels.
Right. So
And-
there's actually way more music than there was 20 years ago.
But it's oversaturated in a way.
In a way, it's oversaturated, and there's this. It's all these niches,
Yeah.
So there isn't one way to really get massive exposure and to reach millions of people. It's like guerrilla warfare in a way.
Yeah, it's true. You got to be on to the next, Facebook and Twitter, and what's the next thing? What's the next marketing tool to use? And that's one of the edges I think a lot of the young artists have, is they grew up in the computer generation, and half the kids out there know how to build their own websites. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you find this incredible phenomena where, in this world of social networking, you're not really competing against other artists. You're competing against other people who want to be famous for the sake of being famous.
Right.
Like Paris Hilton, some guy will get this wild haircut and take a bunch of photos of himself, and he looks like a rock star, but he's not.
Yeah.
But yet all of a sudden lots of people are following him because somehow
Yeah.
he has this charisma, but you don't know why. I mean, 20 years ago, a guy like that, would have had a band and been in music, but now, you're not competing against other guys or girls that are in bands and charismatic and want to be stars.
Right.
You're competing against this whole generation of Paris Hiltons, of
Yeah.
people who want to be famous for the sake of being famous.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing with YouTube. I think YouTube is such a strong tool to get noticed even by record labels. But then again, like you say, you're competing against people who go and do the silly dance, and they've got like 1 million views overnight. And then you've got artists trying to work so hard and do a video on no budget, and it's 4,000 views after a month. You're like, why do 1 million people want to see this guy do his silly dance? And you know what I mean? It's
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
frustrating.
a girl sucking on a lollipop probably gets more views than a great song. But, back to the whole, microbrewery versus Budweiser theory. So, if you take the aggregate of all the microbreweries, they're selling a lot, but there's not one microbrewery that's really doing anything on a massive scale for exposure. So I kind of look at, the music business as sort of the same way now. There's Budweiser, which is all the major labels and all the stuff that's on the radio, and the 10th hit by Rihanna written by the Hit Machine, and the Hit Machine that also writes for all the other pop stars, and the people that write for Kesha write for Britney Spears and write for this one and that one and Katy Perry. And so that's the factory music, that's the Budweiser, and bingo, But the other side of this coin is that, 20 years ago, if you weren't signed to a major label and in the machinery, you were flat broke, working retail somewhere to pay your rent. So the one thing that's happened in sort of leveling the playing field is today there are less people making the big dollars, but there are a lot more people making a living. So,
Right, yeah.
you know, if you're an artist with great music, it's way easier today for you to, you know, do things on a shoestring and get them out there and play shows and sell your T-shirts and CDs to the point where, you know, you can make 50 grand a year and pay your rent and survive without having to work a day job. You can totally do music and survive. 20 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to do that because
Right.
you were either signed to a major label, had big tour support and big advances, or selling millions, making a lot of money, or you might have got one tour and then you're working in the shoe store, you know?
Yeah.
But now there are all these avenues for artists to get exposure for their music and make a little bit of money, enough to make a living.
And they
Yeah.
get a lot of creative control too. There's a lot more creative control with the artists, and just like, you know, the ability to work with a lot more people.
Right. Well, do you think that we're better off or worse off without all the major labels?
Well, you know, I don't know. In some ways, I think it's sort of a shame, you know, that there aren't any major labels or major funding sources that are backing the artist. You know, if this were in the 1600s, it'd be like, you know, the Vatican stopped funding Michelangelo. You know what I mean? Like, there are all these great artists there, but the patron of the arts to support the arts is gone. So artists now have to support themselves. But hey, the good news is that, you know, through all of the, you know, technology and all these tools out there, you know, an artist can get enough going for themselves where they can survive on their music.
Yeah, they don't need
Right.
as much help right off
Well,
the bat.
Gene Simmons is quoted as saying that the downfall of the music industry was the fans, and the fans wanted the music for free, and they took it for free, and that's what killed the music industry, and they fucked it up. Would you agree with that?
No, I would totally disagree with that. I think that the record business fucked itself, and it did it in many different ways. But you know, basically, you know, the record business for a while was chasing the tails of these retailers that, you know, were interested in acquiring and building real estate at the expense of music. So, what I mean by that is that, you know, all these retailers were pushing for people to drop the price of music so they could sell more. The whole idea of, you know, volume
Right.
versus quality, like sell more for less money but make a lot of money. And so that theory allowed like all of these retailers to expand. You know, Tower went from one store to like hundreds of stores around the country to nothing. You know, Virgin, same thing. You know, so that was sort of the beginning of the end of the devalue of music to me.
Right, yeah.
You know, because all of a sudden, I mean, you know, the Best Buy $9.99, you know, where they were actually losing 10 cents for every record they sold. But, you know, if they got someone to buy a dishwasher or a big screen television
Right.
while they were in there, you
Yep,
know, they
it
were
was
great.
getting people in the store.
So now, I mean, you already have in people's minds, you know, a full album is worth less than $10, right? I mean, think nothing about buying a $5 pack of cigarettes that's gone in a day. you
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
I mean, think nothing of buying a lot of things that are consumed and gone. I mean,
Yep.
music, you buy it, you own it for life, you know. So that was the beginning of the devalue. And then I think it was already devalued in people's heads. And then you went into, you know, Napster. And the whole thought that, you know, basically people could share music with their friends. I mean, the whole concept was, you know, what Napster did was really no different than what I did when I was a teenager, which is, you know, I bought all these albums and invited everyone from that I knew at school to come over and listen to music, you know. But what Napster allowed was for a kid in San Francisco to like share music with a kid in Chicago, you know, in sort of a nefarious way because, you know, basically Napster connected people together and I could listen to someone's music collection in Chicago or San Fran. They could listen to mine and, you know, mine. And so essentially music was free.
Yeah, well, it was because you were able to download it out of their library to your library. If it was
Exactly.
just a one listen, it wouldn't have been, as drastic.
But the net effect would have been the same, because if I could go on and listen to a song from somebody's collection in Chicago whenever I wanted to, what's the
Right.
difference whether I download
Yeah,
it or not?
exactly. Yeah.
So the net effect is the same. But the idea was great. I mean, people, when Napster came out, I mean, people still wanted to share music,
Yep.
right? But all of a sudden, like, wow, I can listen to whatever I want for free. So that was like the death knell.
Right.
That was it.
Well, do you think the labels should have like fought back and went after them and like tried to sue
No,
people?
I think the biggest mistake the labels made was by not embracing the technology. In other words, if the guys who run all these record companies would have said, we're going to figure out how to monetize this, because this is like the greatest thing that ever happened. We have people from all over the world sharing music and getting excited about it. I mean, look, Yahoo, Google, MySpace. I mean, a lot of these internet destinations, they figured out how to make money
Yeah,
from music.
exactly.
The money was in the eyeballs of the people sharing the music, right? I mean, YouTube. I mean, who doesn't go to YouTube and look up an old song you want to hear and look at a still picture of the band while you listen to the song?
Exactly.
I mean, people still get excited about sharing music, They just don't want to pay for it.
Right.
However, there are all sorts of ways to monetize your music. You just can't monetize it by selling the songs anymore. So my point of view is that instead of embracing the new generation or the next generation's way of sharing music, instead of embracing that and figuring out how to monetize it, I mean, look, notwithstanding MySpace's poor, pitiful position today because of their last redesign, which killed it, the death of MySpace redesign, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly.
But, the point is that a lot of other people have figured out how to monetize music by using it on their platforms, But the record companies couldn't figure it out. In fact, they fought it. They're still fighting it, I mean, think about this for a minute. If I'm driving along the highway in Michigan and I see one of those guys with the red belts on that's like doing road construction, if I run him over and kill him, it's a $50,000 fine, okay? So, it's $50,000 if I kill this poor guy on the side of the road fixing the road, okay?
Wow.
If I steal a song on the internet, it's a $250,000 fine.
Yeah,
You're basically
kind of whack.
Are they really enforcing that, by the way?
Yes, they are absolutely enforcing it. In fact, the Obama administration, and believe me, I'm an Obama supporter, but, when Obama's administration thinks that a song is worth $250,000, I mean, let's face it, a song is worth 99 cents, okay? Now, if you go into 7-Eleven and you steal a 99-cent candy bar, you're not going to go to jail and pay $250,000 fine.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
But if you steal a song off the internet, it's a $250,000 fine. We're saying that a 99-cent song is more valuable than a human life.
Yeah.
That is the wrong message to send out there.
Yep.
And I think it's one of the reasons that people look at the music industry now and say these people are full of shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Because someone has managed to convince our government that a 99-cent song is worth $250,000.
And let me guess, who is that who convinced the government? The major labels, perhaps?
The RIAA, funded by the
Right.
major labels.
Right.
I mean, how that law ever got passed is like beyond me. But to me, that is and was the death of the music business. When the guys who run the big labels couldn't figure out how to monetize music with a new generation of kids that were excited enough about music to share it and play it, and let's face it, it's like a drug. People they felt like they're getting away with something by getting it for free. It's like shoplifting in a way. But I mean, shoplift a candy bar from the 7-Eleven.
Yeah, right.
No big deal. Give them their buck and get your hand slapped.
Right.
Shoplift a song off the internet, $250,000. Your life is destroyed. You'll never be able to pay that back. I mean, a lot of people have been given $10 million fines. I mean,
Why is it that we haven't heard more about people being prosecuted for that? Is it happening a lot?
Oh, it's happening, absolutely. Well, generally,
I mean, it can't be happening anywhere near as high as the percentage of people that are ripping songs every day, every minute.
Well, they pick and choose cases where they think they can win because, there's this interesting thing called case law. And the last thing in the world the RAAA or anybody wants is case law where some judge says that this is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, somebody can get killed on the side of a highway for $50,000 and you want, $250,000 for a 99-cent song, So they generally try and settle for like pennies on the dollar. So, someone that has a $200 million fine could get rid of it for $20,000 because they know how ridiculous it is.
Right.
But someone has taken them to the mat, and it's in the appeal stage. It hasn't reached the Supreme Court yet, but it's in the Federal Court of Appeals, I believe. It could be the State Court of Appeals, but about a week ago, basically, the Justice Department under Obama's direction basically, put in paperwork basically saying that, they believe a song is worth $250,000 when somebody steals it.
Wow. Well, listen, on that note, we're going to steer the conversation to a little bit we call Picasso's Corner. It's a little bit tech talk, kind of talks about new technology in the music business. We're going to do that real quick. When we come back, final thoughts with Tom Zutaut. Stay tuned.
Hey, how's it going? It's Picasso here. My name's Brian Kesselring, a.k.a. Picasso, and you are in Picasso's Corner. Now shut up and listen. I kind of don't want to go so tech talk today. I want to explain some things that have taken me 25 years in the music biz and creating music to kind of figure out, and they'll be insightful to the new musicians, a good reminder for the intermediate musicians, and a no-duh to people who've been in the game as long as Mickey and myself. But first thing I'm going to talk about is the power of playing with your eyes shut. Doesn't matter if you're a drummer, if you're a guitar player, a bass player, a piano player, and especially, believe it or not, a singer. There's this little thing called muscle memory. When your eyes aren't taking in data, your brain doesn't have to process that, and you start to get a muscle memory, whether it's just with your voice or for your fingers when you're playing guitar, which is also really handy on stage to not have to look at the guitar. And I found it especially handy when I'm playing drums because once you get your kit set up the way you like it, you know where everything is. And so it allows you to completely absorb yourself into the moment, and it's a great practice technique, and you'll find that you do it a lot on stage. And I have found over the years watching some of my favorite musicians, especially some of my favorite singers, is that they sing with their eyes shut. And those tend to be the people, ironically, that I find the most soul in their voice. It's just one of those things, take away what your eyes are seeing. You're not seeing the hot chick in the front row, and you're not seeing the guy in the middle of the crowd who looks like he wants to kick your ass. You're totally in your head, and at least if you don't want to do it live as a practice technique, it'll make you a better player all the way around. And along with that, I kind of want to talk about the power of ear training and explain to people who haven't figured this out yet that unless you don't have a driver's license and don't drive, you have the best independent individual rehearsal space in the world to train your ears, to hone your voice, and to get used to learning what harmonies are, picking them out, practicing them, finding bass lines, finding keyboard lines, finding, exactly what the violin is playing, because music is based up of layers. And there's nary a song on the radio that isn't a complex layering of different melodies which create different harmonies. And so my advice to all the musicians out there is when you're in your car, especially if you got AC and you got the windows rolled up, sing your ass off. And if you're not a singer, if you are a singer, look for the harmonies and try singing just the harmonies, because your ear is going to want to wander to the melody, but go to the harmony and sing the harmony and get used to that with that song, especially if you've got an iPod in your car and you can repeat the same song over and over again. Super handy. Now, if you're a bass player or a guitar player or a keyboard player, search out those lines. And what I've found to be really handy with my bass playing is that I'll look for the guitar line and I'll either sing or hum the guitar line. Then I'll find the guitar harmonies. Then I'll find the keyboard lines. And then you can take that data and focus it into your bass line, and it'll affect your bass playing. And conversely, that the same holds true for guitar players. Guitar players find the vocal harmonies. It'll make you a harmonic singer. The whole thing is just going to give you an ear for every single piece of the music. You'll be able to pick a mix apart, and before you know it, you'll be firing your engineer, and you'll be the engineer. And I find that you'll find through history, drummers are some of the best audio engineers on the planet because they have to listen when they're playing the drums, when they're writing material. They have to listen to every little part of what everybody's doing and incorporate what they do into that, which I think is pretty much the formula of why so many drummers become awesome audio engineers. And so, just use your car. Who cares if you look like an asshole screaming your head off? It's going to teach your ear what it needs to do, and it's going to make you a better musician. So with that, I bid you adieu. This has been Kikasso's Corner. I'm Brian Kesselring, and back to the final mix.
Django.com exposed your music to millions of internet listeners worldwide. Best of all, Django.com allows the artist to target their fans and their genre of music. For example, if you're a metal band, you sound like Metallica, you can literally just target Metallica fans. If you sound like 50 Cent or Jay-Z, you can target Jay-Z and 50 Cent fans. Go to FinalMixShow.com, click on the Django banner, and set up a free account. Start increasing your fan base today. All right, welcome back to the Final Mix. Sitting here with Tom Zutaut and the fabulous Miss Wendy. Tom, a couple things before we wrap up. Just wanted to ask you, A, what do you think the future of the music business is? And B, what advice do you give to someone that may be listening to this that is in a band or thinking about getting into the business? What would be your advice to them?
Buy a gun and shoot yourself. It might be easier. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Go back to school.
There's one thing that I've consistently seen, whether it's today or yesterday or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, when you have music burning in your soul, you just can't get away from it. I mean, whether it's as a fan and, you go to Amoeba every Saturday, like pilgrimage to Amoeba, or if you create music and if that music is burning away inside you, then, don't live your life with regrets. Buy the instruments. The technology is so cheap. I mean, everyone owns a computer. I mean, there's a multitude, talk about Tech Talk, there's a multitude of programs that are free or almost free that you can buy to put your musical ideas down and layer over the top of them. So, if the music is burning in your soul, make it and put it out there.
And keep writing, because when you first start writing, you're going to think it all sucks. But as you keep writing, you'll actually like your own songs better, and they will be better. It's like exercising.
That's good advice.
Yeah, so I mean, that's my advice. And, the other big thing that I say is it's really perseverance in the end, because, you're not the only person out there with music burning inside them that, needs to get it out and and have the desire for people to hear it. But a lot of people give up, and whether it was the whole Guns N' Roses video on MTV story earlier or now, I mean, perseverance is the key, because if you persevere and you never give up, you will eventually be successful. And, not to put, I don't want to put any delusions of grandeur. It's tough out there, and, the sort of what we think when we think of rock star, it's a very different world now. And, every now and then, something busts through and, and there's still the American dream. You could be the next rock star, but you could also just be the next person who makes great music that finds the fan base that will support your music. And, instead of working retail or in a factory, you can make a nice living just off your music. And it's readily available. There's plenty of websites and plenty of places that you can go to get advice on how to do it. But, the main thing is to just believe in yourself and get out there every day, play in front of people, write songs, record them, put them up on the internet and get some feedback, get, people to listen to it, and just never give up, and eventually you'll be successful.
Hear, hear.
Awesome.
Yay.
Well, listen, I think that about does it for this episode of The Final Mix. I want to thank our guest, Tom Zutaut, the fabulous Miss Wendy, Mickey Finn, of course. And till next time, this is John Mahoney saying, believe in yourself, believe in your dreams, and remember, the only people that'll scoff at your dreams are those who have given up on theirs. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night.